Welcome to this explainer. So today, we're unpacking a story that, at first glance looks like this wild, fantastical myth, but underneath, it actually contains one of the absolute most fascinating strategic masterclasses ever recorded. We're looking at the ancient Hindu epic of the Samudra Manthan, the churning of the cosmic ocean. And we aren't just going to recount the mythology here. We're really going to break down the incredible diplomacy, the crisis management, and the sheer tactical genius hidden right inside the source material.
Okay, let's dive right into this dramatic premise. Imagine the absolute worst-case scenario. The ruling powers of the universe have literally lost everything. They're stripped of their wealth, their strength, their home, the whole shebang. So to survive, they have to do the unthinkable. They have to ally with the exact same enemies who just destroyed them. Starting right at this moment of absolute crisis for the divine beings, we see a masterclass in, swallowed pride and survival.
All right, moving into Section 1, the curse and fall. Because to understand the massive scale of this epic, we first got to look at the devastating downfall of the gods.
So this massive power imbalance that kicks off our story, it all started with a simple mistake. Devraj Indra, the king of the gods, was cursed by the quick-tempered sage Durvasa. And because of this curse, the goddess Lakshmi, who of course represents wealth, fortune, and prosperity, completely abandoned the heavenly realm. Without her, the devas, or gods, instantly became weak and absolutely destitute. Naturally, the Daityas, their demonic rivals, didn't hesitate for a second. They saw the weakness, successfully invaded heaven, and just seized total control, completely expelling the gods. So these destitute gods are forced to seek help, eventually finding themselves at the feet of Lord Brahma and Lord Vishnu, basically begging for a solution.
Faced with complete defeat, the gods actually receive a remarkably pragmatic piece of advice. Let's look at Section 2, Lord Vishnu's diplomacy and the tactical alliance he lays out.
Now, what's really interesting here is how this mythological event acts as this brilliant diplomatic strategy. Lord Vishnu tells the gods something super profound. When the time is against you, you have to make peace with your enemies. He instructs them to go straight to King Bali, the leader of the demons, and literally propose an alliance. The goal? To jointly churn the cosmic ocean to extract the Amrit, the nectar of immortality. Vishnu knows this task is way too massive for the weakened gods to handle alone. They need the demons' muscle. So the plan is to ally with King Bali just until the gods can regain their strength, secure that nectar, and then completely turn the tables. It's a highly calculated, high-stakes game of temporary cooperation.
And that brings us to Section 3, Great Churning and Poison. With the alliance struck by appealing directly to King Bali's greed, the monumental task of churning the cosmic ocean actually begins.
The crucial point here is the immense scale of this operation. You don't just stir an ocean with a giant spoon, right? You need literal cosmic engineering. They use the massive Mandar mountain as the churning rod, and the Suki, the giant serpent king, as the churning rope. But there was a huge problem right out of the gate. The mountain started sinking into the ocean floor. So Lord Vishnu actually took the form of Kurma, this giant tortoise, acting as an impenetrable base foundation to support the sinking mountain right on his back. The Devas held the serpent's tail, the Daityas held the head, and this great cosmic churning got underway.
But before any treasures emerged, disaster struck. The extreme friction of the churning released a completely lethal poison known as Halahala. It was so toxic it literally threatened to destroy the entire universe, gods and demons alike. So upon the gods' desperate prayers, Lord Shiva stepped forward and consumed the deadly poison. But here's the thing, he didn't swallow it. He held it right in his throat. The sheer toxicity of the poison turned his throat completely blue, which is what gave him the revered name Neelkant. It's a pretty powerful reminder that in any massive undertaking, before you reach the big reward, you often have to deal with the toxic fallout first.
Once the poison was cleared, some absolutely incredible things began to emerge, phase by phase. First, divine animals appeared. The wish-fulfilling cow, Kamdenu, went to the sages and Vishnu. The majestic horse, Uchai was claimed by the demon king Bali. And the multi-trunked elephant, Airavat, went to Indra. Then came the Kaustubha Mani, this incredibly precious gem claimed by Vishnu. Right after that, goddess Lakshmi herself emerged, restoring prosperity, and she chose Lord Vishnu as her consort. And then, finally, the ultimate prize arrived. Dhanvantari, the divine physician, emerged holding the golden pot of Amrit, the nectar of immortality.
But, as you might expect, as soon as the ultimate prize appears, that fragile alliance absolutely shatters. This brings us right into Section 4, Mohini Avatar and Nectar.
The demons, suddenly realizing the absolute power of this nectar, instantly betrayed the truce. They just snatched the pot right from Dharmantari's hands. But because they were entirely driven by greed and ego, they immediately began violently fighting among themselves, arguing over who was going to get the very first sip. So the demons had the prize, and the weakened gods were completely helpless once again. They desperately needed another stroke of genius from Lord Vishnu to save the whole mission. To get the nectar back, Lord Vishnu didn't choose to fight them physically, which perfectly proves that intellect triumphs over brute force. Instead, he manifested as Mohini, an avatar of ultimate divine illusion and just unmatched beauty. Vishnu basically uses the demons' own lust and distraction against them. Mohini gracefully approaches these bickering demons, and stunned by her beauty, they completely lose their focus. They're so captivated that they voluntarily hand the pot of nectar right over to her, trusting her to distribute it fairly among them. So she essentially disarms an incredibly powerful enemy without throwing a single punch.
Mohini convinces the distracted demons to let her distribute the nectar, smartly seating the gods and demons in two separate rows to maintain order. And this sets the stage for our final act, Section 5, Rahu, Ketu, and Victory.
Now, just when you think the plan is working flawlessly, and Mohini is secretly giving the real nectar only to the gods, we hit the absolute climax of our explainer with a shocking act of espionage. One demon, Swarbhanu, actually sees through the mesmerizing illusion. Realizing what Mohini is doing, he pulls off a brilliant tactical move of his own. He quickly disguises himself as a deva, sneaks right into the gods' row, sits between the sun god and the moon god, and actually manages to receive a drop of the immortal nectar.
And this epic clash directly gives birth to one of the most fascinating astrological origin stories out there. The exact moment Swarbhanu drinks the nectar, the sun and moon gods spot the disguise and alert Mohini. Lord Vishnu, instantly dropping the Mohini illusion, summons his divine weapon, the Sudarshan Chakra, and beheads the demon right on the spot. But because that single drop of nectar had just reached his throat, he actually doesn't die. Both severed parts become immortal. The head becomes known as the planet Rahu, and the headless torso becomes the planet Ketu. According to the source texts, this is exactly why Rahu and Ketu periodically swallow the sun and the moon to this day, causing eclipses, basically as endless revenge for exposing him. Following this incredibly intense moment, Lord Vishnu vanishes. And as the demons finally snap out of the illusion and realize they've been completely tricked out of the nectar, they attack in a furious rage. But by then, it's just too late. The newly immortal and fully empowered gods easily defeat them, reclaiming heaven and their lost glory. You see, the entire crisis was averted not by immediate retaliation when they were weak, but by realizing that when time is against you, necessity and diplomacy dictate that even your greatest enemies should be made allies.
So, I want to leave you with this pretty provocative thought to show how the epic strategy of the Samudra Manthan is just as relevant today as it was in mythology. In your own life's overwhelming challenges, do you rely only on brute strength, or do you use the strategic patience to ally with your obstacles until you're strong enough to overcome them? When faced with a massive disadvantage, it's rarely the one who fights the hardest right away who wins. It's the one who understands timing, who knows exactly when to cooperate, when to endure the poison, and when to finally take the prize. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep analyzing, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next one.